Thank you for joining me. My name is Diana of Webinars by Rockwell. This video is designed with the administrative professional in mind and the unique job duties and tasks we are expected to do every day. With over 40 years of experience as a secretary, administrative assistant, and executive assistant, I hope my experiences and skill sets can help you excel in your chosen or fallen into profession. I appreciate your choosing to spend the next few minutes with me as we discuss etiquette for the admin. Let's get started. In this discussion, we will talk about how etiquette is dependent on your corporate culture, allowing your boss privacy, how additional duties as assigned can be overplayed, and we'll wrap it up with some advice based on my own experiences, both the good and the bad. Some people seem to have a sixth sense about what to do and when to do it. Others need guidance and tend to learn from experience, both good and bad. It's the unfortunate experiences we try to avoid with this discussion. So let's talk about etiquette for the admin. Etiquette is dependent on your corporate culture. Why is one office different from another? When you're interviewing, be mindful of the type of industry or office you are interviewing for. For instance, if you are applying for a job at an advertising agency, dress the part by wearing a suit or a nice blouse, skirt, or pants, and a jacket or sweater. Do your research about the industry and history of the company, and make sure it's an industry you want to be immersed in. On the other hand, if you're applying for a job at a construction company, you might want to wear jeans and work boots to the interview. My first secretarial job was for a business school teacher's husband for wholesale plumbing and electrical fixtures and parts for contractors. The business had been established in the late 1800s and was still going strong and opening branches regionally. There were about 35 workers, from sales to bookkeeping to purchasing agent to the warehouse and counter workers. This was in the late 1970s, and technology in the office had risen to electric typewriters, mimeograph machines. Yeah, we did a lot on paper. I was the secretary in the plumbing division. The showroom, when you walked in the front door, was very nicely decked out. So my first experience was much different than what my actual workspace would be. Our desks were the old gray steel desks with the linoleum desk surface, which was very hard to clean. The typewriter pulled up out of the right-hand side lower drawer. My office was lined with filing cabinets, as was the switchboard area, which doubled as a cash register for cash sales. Salesmen, and yes, they were all men, were required to wear dress shirts and ties, but no one really wore a suit. We were dealing with dirty and sometimes stinky contractors day in and day out. There was no carpeting except for the sales room floor, which showcased bathtubs, sinks, and like fixtures. We all punched time clock, except the salesman, and treated the staff, it was borderline abusive. The dress code was dresses, skirt or pant suits, and stockings were a requirement. One of the bookkeepers wore the holiest stockings I have ever seen. She was not seen by customers, thank goodness, and was kept in her upstairs office for the majority of her day. Wearing nice clothes didn't really get you anywhere because they would be soiled easily and ruined. We were only earning minimum wage, which, even though those who had been there for some time really didn't get pay raises. We were also required to work 44 hours a week all year. Even though we had a skeleton crew during the summers on Saturday, each of the secretaries rotated on a schedule to work those extra 4 hours. So that week you worked 48 hours. Our daily schedule changed from 8 to 5 with an hour for lunch to 7:22 to 5:18 at 2:10 an hour. It was grueling hours with no appreciation, sprinkled with sexual harassment as a standard course of behavior for the majority of the men. To top it off, the new girl, me, covered the switchboard while all the others took two 15-minute breaks a day. That meant I didn't get a break. And when that suddenly dawned on me and I attempted to take a solo break after the others returned to their desks, I was reprimanded and actually manhandled and escorted back to my desk. And I was put back in my place in the proper pecking order. So having said all that, your first order of business is to determine whether your office is formal or informal. If you're working for a prestigious law firm, you need to conduct yourself in a dignified manner and dress accordingly. Don't use slang, legal jargon, or swear in front of or at a client. Use proper English and by all means be polite and courteous. If you work in the Harley-Davidson CEO's office, your work must still be professional, but your mannerisms and dress must reflect the corporate culture. You can probably dress in motorcycle gear, leather pants, leather vest, motorcycle boots, but keep your speech proper when dealing with either customers or the dealership owners. I have a friend whose mother worked in an insurance company. It was a long-established insurance company, but a small one. They hired a young woman as their receptionist, and she interviewed well. She dressed appropriately and accepted the offer. After a few days, she showed up in a hot pink sweatsuit. This was before the days of the sleek running suits or the warm-up suits or even leggings. And she accessorized with pink bunny slippers. I swear it's a true story. They sent her home to change her clothes, but she never returned. They didn't know if she ran out of clothes or wasn't able to do the laundry or what happened. They had no clue. When starting a job with a new boss, always schedule a one-on-one meeting in the early days. They may hit the ground running and just assume you know what they are doing. However, each boss is different, and they should be aligning your practices with theirs. The first question I ask a new boss in this meeting is what type of learner they are. Are they visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? If they don't know, and some don't, give them the option. Do you want to have me print out things for you to review, or do you want them on email? Do they wish to get text messages, Teams chats, or emails? In my office, we ask questions face-to-face whenever possible. If my boss is super busy and it's not an urgent matter, I will email. If there's a person waiting for the next meeting, I text or Teams chat to let them know instead of knocking on the door and interrupting the phone call or current meeting that they are in. I'm lucky because he's usually punctual and keeps an eye on the clock when he has back-to-back meetings. But how your boss wants you to handle interruptions should be discussed early so there are no unexpected miscommunications or unexpected consequences to how you chose to handle them. How does your boss want messages delivered? We've done away with the little pink slips while you were out. So I do one of two things. If it's an outside person, a vendor or sales call, or even a donor who wants to speak to them directly, I type up an email. If it's another staff member and it's just an informal, tell him I stopped by or tell him I'm looking for him, I'll just do a verbal relay of that message as he's walking in and out of the door next to me. Usually it's Carrie was looking for you or Bob stopped by while you were out. And most of the time they will email him anyway or catch him in the hall or in one of their multitude of meetings. At one point, I actually created a template in Outlook that looked like the phone message slip. If you use this method, just remember to put the party's name in the subject line rather than having your boss receive 100 phone messages with the same subject line that just says phone message. He may be trying to find a specific message, and it might be easier just to add the person's name or the vendor name. Use descriptive words like urgent or not urgent when you get a chance in the description line, and others to denote the immediacy of the call. If we get a call from one of our major donors, he always wants to be interrupted. We have the top 10 hot list, which helps me know who to interrupt him for. And I never interrupt when he's meeting with the college president or the HR director. I may have to Teams chat him if there's an emergency on campus or with a student or there's been a bias incident or one of those types of situations. You'll always want to know in advance how he wants visitors cared for. Do you help them off with their coat, offer coffee or a cold beverage, have them wait in the waiting room, or if he's not in his office, have them seated in his office? Does he want to be introduced? Does he want me to introduce myself and have a conversation, or just let them be? If he's running late, he may want me to distract them with conversation about the weather or current events. Of course, if I know the person, I'm allowed to ask how they are, how the family is, how the dog is, etc. Many times he'll walk out and say, Ashley's coming to meet me. She can wait in my office. And that's always so appreciated because I would typically ask them to have a seat in the waiting area until he returns. If he's not there, I will text or Teams chat to tell him that the person is here, unless they're super early and they know it. Then I wait till about 7 or 5 minutes or so before the scheduled time to let him know that they are there. Ask how they want you to handle emergencies. I worked in an IT office for 10 years, and if the internet or a major software system went down, it was interrupt immediately, no matter what. That could mean knock on the door, run around the building to find her, text her, or call her on her cell phone. We once had a heavy windstorm that pulled out the old three-phase wiring to a building near ours. The electric was run in serial, which means when one building goes down, 2 or 3 others will too. Unfortunately, our data center was in the next building, which crashed everything. 2 of our network colleagues worked straight through the weekend, never leaving the campus to bring our systems back up. It was a $70,000 problem and an emergency call to our supplier, who had someone drive parts to us on a Saturday. During this time, we kept a conference bridge call open with campus safety, the president, and the CFO, and any other interested parties who came and went for updates. They would text when they would be doing an update so everyone would hop on the call. We gave the call information to our electric provider as well because they had to update us as to their progress with restoring the wiring to the building from the street. You may want to ask in specific circumstances or in a debrief after an emergency happens, what to do when an earthquake hits. What do we do when a tornado hits? What do we do if the building floods? What do we do if the building's on fire? What do we do if we lose electricity during a storm or the grid fails? What do we do if there's an accident and an executive level employee is injured? And many more questions. When I was in IT, we developed a disaster recovery plan that shows step by step how to power down the data center so nothing crashes, what systems to turn back on first, and it provided us with the need for a generator to be installed next to our building so when the power goes off, the lights can stay on and we can react accordingly to the specific incident. Was it a lightning strike during the storm, an accident that took out a pole, an earthquake, a water main break? Was it a transformer that caught on fire? And yes, we've had all of these things happen in 10 years. Back in 1990, I was hired to support the CEO of a financial advisory firm. There were 7 employees, but all the fixtures, furniture, art on the walls were all top-notch. I was just a kid from the wrong side of town who was related by marriage to one of his former colleagues. He decided I had potential, but I was nervous because I'd been a stay-at-home mom for 5 years, and I now had 3 children. I wasn't considered trailer trash, but probably did reflect my upbringing unconsciously. I needed a much better wardrobe than the few dresses I wore to church, and I needed to speak in a professional manner. We were expected to wear suits or dresses if clients were expected. No shoes that flip-flopped, that was his personal preference, when you walked, and stockings were a must. No sleeveless blouses or dresses unless you wore and kept on a jacket or sweater. No tattoos or piercings could be visible except for one hole in your earlobe. We had Stickley brand furniture and real artwork on the walls. We had the kitchen company wood mode come through and put up paneling halfway up the walls, and it was all very nice. I had to alter my phrasing and speech patterns to reflect where I now worked. I couldn't walk around with my shoes off or eat at my desk, and I couldn't answer the phone without sounding professional and use terms like yeah, and instead of the word you, say yeah, just an example. It was all about extending the facade of dignity and wealth so clients would feel comfortable with the firm handling their investments. The dress code and speech pattern in tandem was to project that same comfort and security. The boss once told me he didn't really care for the Cadillac he drove, but the clients expected that level of luxury because if he couldn't take care of his own money, how could they expect him to handle theirs? So on trips for work, he stayed in high-end hotels, flew first class, and belonged to the country club and the city club. They served on the board of Red Cross, the Art Museum, the prestigious Home for the Elderly, and the Performing Arts Center, all to keep up appearances. And I think there was a little bit about meeting people as well. You may also want to distinguish yourself by your choice of music. That might not be the first thing people think of, but it's an unconscious thing you might not notice, but you certainly get the vibe. In the aforementioned office, they played classical music. Even the Christmas music was classical. In the wholesale plumbing office, we played the regular radio at the switchboard, but no other music was provided through the building. When I was at the copier dealer, we didn't have music either. The church office played AM oldies at the local station. It was more contemporary than the classics, and we were sure the lyrics were G-rated enough that it wouldn't offend anyone's sensibilities that came into the office. It was in an old home, so it was more or less the back porch was my office. Very strange setup. The IT office, it was up for grabs. We sometimes played contemporary music and just at our own workstations. We were in the basement of an older brick building. Luckily, we had windows, but still had the concrete floor and the ratty 30-year-old orange carpet or even bare concrete. However, last summer when I was promoted to assist the Vice President of Advancement Communications and Community Events, which is in the President's office suite, I went back to classical. It just seemed fitting for our building, which was constructed in 1890 with 20-foot ceilings, old wooden doors with transom windows above them. I do sometimes play YouTube Reiki music, but that can get a little woo-woo now and again, so I'm careful when and how loud I play it. I'm in an open area just inside the door of the hallway with two vice president offices behind me. So my best advice is to be observant and absorb the culture established in your office and adjust your behavior, dress, and speech to complement it. Allowing your boss some privacy. Why is everything such a secret? One of the hardest things to learn is when to excuse yourself. It's a delicate balance of privacy and a time waster. When I worked for the financial advisor, he would call me into his office and dictate letters, notes from client meetings, and give me instructions to do something or create reports, graphs, tables, whatever. He would leave the door open, so interruptions were frequent, and phone calls still came in. People had learned to blurt information when they received it because that was his preference. But it was uncomfortable for me to be sitting there with a pile of folders and odd papers I was to work with when a phone call came in or someone stopped by to speak to him. Sometimes I shouldn't be privy to the conversations. Sometimes the phone calls or visits lasted longer than 5 minutes that was expected. I also had more work waiting for me at my desk, so even though he would gesture for me to wait, I would for a couple of minutes, and then I would silently excuse myself. If it wasn't kind of in your face, I would take my stuff with me, but if there was a lot of it and it would take a trip or two, I mainly just left it there, but I took my steno pad with me, and I would get back to work. It was basically a horribly managed waste of time, and he often kept me after hours for up to 2 hours while I had children to pick up and dinner to cook. So finding that balance of when to leave takes practice and also shows your boss that you do have your own mind and can make up your own decisions. I often felt he owned my time because he was paying me a whole $8 an hour. And if he wanted me to sit in his office while he talked on the phone to another person or had a conversation over me with one of the other portfolio managers, that was his prerogative. I believe he was also arrogant enough to be late all the time. So 2 hours late for his wedding wasn't a big deal to him. Thank goodness his bride lied about the time and he was only 30 minutes late. So try to be conscious of the schedule to know when not to take the boss bad news. Don't tell them 5 minutes before they need to make a presentation to the president about next year's budget and projects planned. Wait until after the meeting unless it's an absolute emergency. Know when to interrupt a meeting. Typically, if there's an emergency, someone on the hot list. When I worked at the church, if someone was in an accident or had a heart attack and in the hospital suddenly, or the hospital would call with a death was imminent, the pastor did not want me to interrupt with the news that someone had died, which was surprising to me. But he said there was nothing he needed to do immediately. But I would know to clear his calendar so he could meet with the family. I would also suggest discussing different scenarios with your boss, as we discussed in the last section, to make those decisions. Interrupting with a closed door is a different scenario than when the door is open. Most bosses have an open door policy now, but I learned the hard way that dialing a cell phone doesn't make noise like the old desk phones did. I accidentally interrupted countless times because I didn't know the boss was on the phone. So I altered my blurting to usually more than one question, waiting until in between meetings, and gave a light tap on the door to ask if they were in the middle of something or if I can interrupt for a minute. I often say I just need 1 minute, which is correct. In my current office setup, my boss's door is closed more often than open. My desk is in an open area with no privacy, so if I'm on the phone or on a Zoom or Teams conference call, the VPs may close their doors so that they can concentrate on what they're doing if they're writing or they're speaking on the phone to someone. We now have lots of our meetings on the phone or via Zoom or Teams, so their doors are closed regularly throughout the day. Also remember, if your desk is not private, meaning you can't close your door, please lock your screen with the Windows and the L key. That way no one can use your computer to do something mean or to compromise you. Some things on your computer seen by others are fireable offenses, so be careful. Always stow your purse, keys, cell phone in the drawer or in a locked cabinet. I've seen money disappear from purses being stolen right off someone's desk. Your keys not only power your car and get you into your home or apartment, but your work keys will allow a burglary to occur without breaking and entering. Keep in mind that you may have confidential information on your desk. I have credit card statements on my desk quite often. I have invoices that have our FedEx account number that can be compromised and was a few years ago to the tune of $7,000. Just turning papers over when people walk in may eliminate the temptation to read what's on your desk. Be aware that every good salesperson learns early in their career to read upside down. Either minimize or lock your screen if it's viewable from the door or as people walk by. I have a coworker who stops by unannounced, sometimes several times a day, and always asks if I'm busy. I'm always busy, but he wants to vent for 45 minutes. I tend to leave my email screen up and keep working while he's talking, but I've caught him reading it. He doesn't take nonverbal cues to move along, so it's a struggle. So you may want to protect your information not only from visitors, but from colleagues as well. That's essential if you're working in HR or if you're dealing with personnel type issues for your boss. The dreaded other duties as assigned. Is that really in your job description? Over my career, I've been asked to babysit, be a waitress, a personal shopper, a graphics designer for in-laws' wedding party, anniversary party invitations, order bathroom supplies without knowing the vendor or the process, schedule cable TV and internet installations, make hotel reservations for a film editor who had won an Oscar, by the way, and his two prodigies, arrange flights for a boss's family member, and I've been asked to spy on coworkers. I've answered phone calls from home on Saturday and Sunday mornings while I was in the bathtub. I've driven the boss home when his car was in for repair and gotten mine stuck in his driveway because my reverse wasn't working. I've been yelled at and sent home for half a day to think about what I'd done when I was trying to train a new hire in our satellite office working remotely rather than having them give her 2 hours to spend with me. Turned out she was hopped up on pain meds and had overreacted to my very gentle formatting corrections. They put her on medical leave to dry out. She never did return, but I didn't get an apology, nor did they ask for my side before coming to their decision to send me home. I was even asked to resign. The reason? The official reason was that they ran out of copier toner for an hour during tax season, but it was in the backup copier. The real reason? The boss semi-retired and named his son as president of the company. And at 36 years old, he was not mature enough. And I called him out on his BS. He allowed other workers to slough off work and delegate everything that they were supposed to be doing, and they still earned their manager's salary. She was a glorified proofreader at $50K a year because she had a bachelor's degree in business. She didn't call clients back. She didn't do what was asked of her. She didn't handle taxes or trust distributions. That was all part of her job duties. All essential tasks in that job description were delegated to someone else. I recall one day in particular that this new boss spent 8 hours calling and complaining to the contractor that had built his new home because the stream that ran through his backyard came with bugs that congregated in his garage. Both he and the manager conspired to get rid of me and had someone go through my desk when I was at lunch. And they weren't very good at it either. I always knew when they had been through it. I was devastated because I was already barely hanging on to my composure due to the death of my husband 31 days before that. I refused to resign. I hadn't done anything to warrant it. I made him be the boss and put on his big boy pants. And I made him fire me. I milked unemployment for as long as I could. I was already collecting Social Security benefits for my children, and I was an at-home mom for another 2 years. I was extremely afraid to look for a job because I didn't know if they had blackballed me. They had enough power to do it. But I was getting bored and I was getting housebound. Not to mention that my new husband was costing me copious amounts of money just to live day to day. So wrapping it up, setting priorities and boundaries in alignment with your corporate vision and mission in conjunction with your own ethics will help lead you on this journey. I tell new hires to start as they mean to continue, meaning don't change your personality to adjust your work behavior to match your corporate culture. If classical music is called for, find some you can tolerate. If heavy metal rock is called for, find a compromise that still fits with the corporate image and doesn't drive you crazy. Speaking proper English should never be a struggle. We write it every day in emails and in other correspondence. So my last thoughts are to keep in mind your main focus is to assist your boss. Your next responsibility is to accomplish the items on your job description. If your job description no longer reflects what you do, it may be time to change it. Write up a draft and review it with your boss. You may be surprised when HR says you should have a different title due to the change in your duties. And if you're lucky, it might come with a raise as well. Other duties as assigned can be a wide variety of things that stretch your skills or have nothing to do with your skills at all. Last fall, I created a TV guide version of our fall weekend activities, only to have the event canceled due to COVID restrictions. It was just a Gantt chart with the events down the left column and the times and duration across the top. But I spent days on it, and it was a thing of beauty. I was very proud of it. It's fair to say that no one is born knowing how to navigate these types of scenarios for that specific boss. It's all on a learning curve, some trial and error, and if you've planned well, not a lot of guessing for the desired outcome. Knowing your boss's preferences will go a long way to make both of you successful, and you can be that rock star admin you dream of being. Having an open discussion about these matters will head off the miscommunication and unvoiced expectations. It will also set the tone for future interactions. By being proactive, it shows your boss you care about handling his business properly. Thank you for joining us to talk about etiquette for the admin. I wish I could say it was easy and cut and dried, but it is interdependent on you and your boss's personalities and your corporate culture. Watch our social media for newly announced topics. Webinars by Rockwell provides a wide variety of videos that range from 10 minutes to 50 plus minutes, all for a very low cost. Teachable.com has a multitude of courses offered, and you can create your login for free. Bye for now.